James Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is one of the most radical experiments in narrative form and consciousness in early 20th century fiction. By tracing Stephen Daedalus's development from infancy to early adulthood, Joyce exposes the ideological forces, family, religion, nationalism, and language itself that shape and constrain individual identity. The novel's formal innovations, especially its evolving use of language and perspective, mirror Stephen's intellectual growth while simultaneously placing his self-understanding under critical scrutiny. The novel opens with the deceptively simple phrase, "once upon a time," invoking the familiar structure of a fairy tale. For the first time in literature, Joyce filters language through the consciousness of an infant. The childlike diction, rhythmic repetitions, and fragmented perceptions offer the reader direct access to Stephen's early mental life. This stream of consciousness technique creates the illusion of unplanned narration, as if a window had been opened into the character's mind, allowing thoughts to emerge without mediation. At this stage, Stephen has not yet mastered language, and the narrative voice reflects his limited linguistic and conceptual grasp of the world. As the novel progresses, the language grows increasingly complex, mirroring Stephen's education and intellectual maturation. Joyce aligns style with consciousness, simple syntax gives way to elaborate philosophical reflection, and third-person narration gradually shifts toward first-person diary entries in the final chapter. This transition from an apparently omniscient perspective to a subjective one is a key modernist strategy, comparable to Conrad's use of Marlowe in Lord Jim. From the beginning, Stephen is confronted with authority figures who seek to shape his identity. The father figure functions as a sender of wisdom and a representative of social norms, while institutions such as school and church enforce discipline and obedience. Patriotism is introduced early as a form of ideological conditioning. Stephen learns that Ireland is the little green place and England the wild rose, symbols that children are taught to internalize from a very young age. However, Stephen's childish mispronunciations, the greenwood botherth, the wild rose blossoms, undermine the solemnity of these lessons. Joyce satirizes nationalist indoctrination by mixing symbols and territories, exposing their arbitrariness and revealing how political identities are imposed before they can be understood. This critique of nationalism is further developed through the figure of Charles Stewart Parnell, a central presence in the novel's political imagination. Parnell, a member of the British Parliament and a leading Irish nationalist, is destroyed by his own supporters after an affair with a married woman. Excommunicated by the church and dying in poverty, he becomes for Joyce the emblem of the Irish hero betrayed by the very forces that claim to defend national virtue. At the Christmas dinner, the violent argument between Dante, who supports the church's condemnation of Parnell, and Stephen's father dramatizes the fracture between religious authority and political aspiration. Dante, aligned with Catholic orthodoxy and monarchy, embodies institutional repression, while Parnell stands as a fallen patriarchal figure whose fate exposes the destructive power of moral absolutism. Stephen's declaration of independence crystallizes his rejection of imposed identities. "I will not serve that in which I no longer believe, whether it call itself my home, my fatherland, or my church." This statement marks a decisive break from family, nation, and religion, forces he perceives as destructive to his artistic potential. His refusal reflects a distinctly modernist stance: identity is not inherited but chosen. To become himself, Stephen must leave Ireland, embracing exile as a condition of creative freedom. Joyce thus presents modernism as simultaneously national and international, rooted in a specific cultural context yet compelled to transcend it. Joyce's aesthetic program reinforces this position. Stephen replaces the traditional Christian trinity with a new triad: silence, exile, and cunning. Silence signals Joyce's refusal to impose meaning on the reader. Instead, he offers images of the world as it truly is, demanding interpretation rather than passive consumption. Cunning, in a Machiavellian sense, involves doubleness and irony, thinking one thing while doing another, appearing open while pursuing a hidden purpose. This strategy allows Joyce to critique ideology from within, exposing its contradictions without overt moralizing. Throughout the novel, Stephen struggles to locate himself within language and history. His attempt to define his identity, Stephen Daedalus, Class of Elements, Clongowes Wood College, reveals the tension between selfhood and institutional classification. Language itself becomes an imperial force. Stephen's consciousness is shaped by English, the language of colonial power. Questions such as what was after the universe and reflections on God's real name express his desire to uncover a perfect correspondence between language and reality, a key to ultimate meaning. Yet Joyce consistently allows the reader to see more than Stephen understands. By placing his protagonist in uncomfortable or ironic situations, Joyce resists identification. The symbolic weight of Stephen's name underscores this trajectory. Stephen evokes martyrdom and sacrifice, while Daedalus refers to the ancient Greek artist and architect who built the labyrinth and escaped it through ingenuity. The labyrinth functions as a modernist symbol of disorientation, complexity, and pilgrimage, reflecting Stephen's psychological and artistic journey. Joyce's episodic structure, 5 loosely connected chapters marked by temporal gaps, reinforces this sense of fragmentation and resists the linear progression typical of the classical Bildungsroman. Traditionally, the Bildungsroman charts a young protagonist's development towards social integration and moral maturity. Critics such as Franco Moretti have argued that the English Bildungsroman flourishes in contexts of social stability and ideological consensus. Joyce's novel, by contrast, depicts the failure of classical Bildung. In colonial Ireland, the only path to advancement for a Catholic subject is submission to the church and participation in its hierarchy. A portrait exposes and rejects this model. While the novel retains certain features of the genre, rebellion against paternal authority, vocational crisis, and artistic apprenticeship, it ultimately critiques the pedagogical assumptions underlying traditional narratives of self-formation. Joyce's modernist Bildungsroman does not culminate in reconciliation but in dissent. In the early chapters, Stephen passively resists cultural authority through hypersensitivity and withdrawal. Only in the final chapter does he actively reject normative models of development and assert an alternative conception of the self. Artistic formation becomes an act of evasion rather than assimilation, a refusal of socialization rather than its fulfillment.